Hi everyone, I'm Danielle Langton, and in this video we're going to be talking about T.S. Eliot's The Love Song of J. Alfred Prufrock. T.S. Eliot is one of the major poets associated with modernism, and you see that represented in this poem because we have a lot of gritty images. This is, to run parallel with what I talk about in my video on Ezra Pound and Imagism. So think of it this way. Before photography, the way you might see yourself is in a sort of crappy, cloudy mirror, if you could afford one. And also, if you had this kind of money, in a painting or to someone or for someone to sketch you. But you'd have to think of that as being a little more like a filter on a camera. It's not an entirely accurate representation of you. Whereas when we have more of the commonality of photography by the mid 1800s and on, it's sort of like where we get the expression, the camera doesn't lie. You can see all the flaws, all the imperfections, and you have many images like that throughout the love song of J. Alfred Prufrock. Now, T.S. Eliot is actually born as an American, but becomes later an expatriate as he ends up residing in the UK. Now, as a child, he had a health condition which led to surgeries, which rendered him like in a kind of bedridden state for many years of his childhood, and that prevented him from doing the sorts of quote unquote normal activities that young children like to partake in, outdoor activities, physical activities. So while stuck in his bed, recovering from these situations, he was often reading. And so this is often where we say this is where that whole like vein of inspiration to be a writer comes from with T.S. Eliot. Now, with T.S. Eliot, with the love song of J. Alfred Prufrock, we start out with something introducing us to the poem. In the beginning of the love song of J. Alfred Prufrock, we begin with some lines that are actually from Dante's Inferno. This is from Canto 27, and this is actually someone being punished in hell. If you are familiar with Dante's Inferno, or one of the third sections, one of three sections of the Divine Comedy. This character that Dante encounters as he's venturing through hell before he will go on through purgatory and paradise is someone who says, okay, I'll tell you why I'm here, what I send, because I don't think you'll tell anyone else. That's basically that backstory in a nutshell. So there's also something else going on here. To assume that your audience can A, read this because it's not in English, and that they are educated enough to know that much detail about Dante's Inferno, that particular segment and that particular character makes a lot of assumptions about who your readers are, and perhaps it could even be insulting or pretentious or arrogant. So that kind of parallels this character that we're talking about. We are reading this poem like a dramatic monologue. So think of, say, My Last Duchess by Robert Browning. So this Mr. J. Alfred Prufrock, this is the sorts of assumptions that Mr. Prufrock might make, that the people reading this are of that level of elitism as he is. And also remember, this is a love song, but it seems pretty sad to be a love song. But remember, love songs aren't always happy. So we are going somewhere, not just in the beginning, but many times. We are in a space of in between. Let us go then, you and I, when the evening is spread out against the sky like a patient etherized upon a table. So as this stanza goes on, we have streets that follow like a tedious argument. The streets come up again, the outside world, the urban sort of setting. And well, we have a physical setting described. This is also sort of like a dreamlike state. So a patient is etherized on a table. Etherized would have been the early 20th century version of saying to be put under anesthesia, like for a surgery or something. And so you aren't quite asleep. You are in a type of sleep per se, but you're not dead and you're not alive. You're not conscious and awake. So you are in an in-between state. We would call this an in-betweenness with a hyphen between in and betweenness, because this is playing also on an anthropological term called in-betweenness, and that means it's like, okay, we transitioned in this one part of culture from having these sorts of practices or mannerisms. And then in the other half of that decade or that century or whatever the measurement is, people no longer do that. So if you look at the gray space of when that change happened, that is the in-betweenness. It's kind of like when a caterpillar is morphing into a butterfly in a cocoon. That's a state of in-betweenness. It's happening and we know it's happening, and basically it like melts, dissolves inside of that, and then it like reconstructs into a totally different creature, right? A butterfly. And so that's a state of in-betweenness. We also have the in-betweenness mentioned with this reference to Michelangelo. Twice this comes up in the room. The women come and go talking of Michelangelo. I'm sure you recognize Michelangelo's name. There might you might associate his name more with sculpture, but he's also connected to the paintings in the on the ceiling of the Sistine Chapel, and probably the most prominent or significantly noted of those is in the center, called the Creation of Adam. And something that's very fascinating about this is, so this is taking biblical stories, and this is about God creating the first man. But what you see when you look at the actual detail is that they do not actually touch. It's like, oh, just so close. But this is also, so this is allowing us to kind of start looking at the poem through a lens of existentialism, a sort of why am I here? Trying to connect to a higher power, a higher entity, whatever you prefer to label that as. And so trying to understand your purpose in life. Because as I mentioned earlier, as a love song, he certainly, Mr. Prufrock, doesn't seem very happy. And so it's not just because of some sort of unrequited love. He's talking about himself and what he's supposed to do. Shall I part my hair? Should I eat a peach? Shall I roll my trousers and walk on the beach? So all these things he's asking, questioning about doing, it's these are all like little minute, almost insignificant things related to a more prominent question of like, what's my purpose in life? Why do I exist? So with the going back and forth to Michelangelo, the fact that we don't just go to it once, we go to it twice. It's kind of like if you've ever been in an art gallery, you can often accidentally get a little lost. They're a little bit like a labyrinth in the way they are laid out. You might be circling around and then go back through accidentally a gallery you've already been into. And so they could be suggesting that. But also, since this painting is in the Sistine Chapel, it could be a reference to questioning God and the meaning of life. So you also have this reference to the yellow fog that rubs its back upon the window panes, the yellow smoke that rubs its muzzle on the window panes, licked its tongue into the corners of the evening, lingered upon the pools that stand in drains, let fall upon its back the soot that falls from chimneys, and then it's going to curl once about the house and fall asleep. So students usually say when I ask, like, what kind of animal-like qualities do you see in that? And people will usually say a cat or a dog. And it does have those zoomorphic qualities. And what you have going on here with this yellow fog, this is like the smoke or smog produced by the factories. So if you remember back to, say, my William Blake video, which we talked about the beginnings of the Industrial Revolution. So now we are in 1915, and that's been going on for a bit. So that pollution that humankind is making, now it's just sort of an assumed, accepted part of life. The capitalism and pollution that comes with that industrial revolution. So this smog, the byproduct, it's like it has been domesticated as part of our life, the way that animals can be domesticated. Now, going on when he's asking questions like, do I dare? Do I dare? And then the self-consciousness of the people talking about him, about the bald spot in the middle of his hair, and the things he's wearing. He is very self-deprecating. We see that come up again going into the end, such as when he says, no, I am not Prince Hamlet, nor was meant to be. I am an attendant lord, one that will do to swell a progress, start a scene or two. So here he's calling himself like not a main character, but just a supporting actor, just not important enough to be in the main scenes. And even in the end, when he's talking about the mermaids, when he says he's walking along the beach and he says, I have seen them, the mermaids, riding seaward on the waves, combing the white hair of the waves blown back when the wind blows the water white and black. We have lingered in the chambers of the sea by sea girls wreathed with seaweed, red and brown. Before this, when he's talking about them and I'm talking about how enigmatic they are, he says, I do not think that they will sing to me. This is just kind of like an incel, self-deprecating thing to say, as you've already seen the rest of this person, the speaker's personality in the poem. And then in that very ending line, till human voice us, wake us, and we drown. Remember, in the beginning, we started out with the evening stretched against the sky like a patient etherized on a table. So being put under anesthesia. It's not even a dream state. You're just quote unquote asleep. And so now the human voices have awakened the speaker and they're drowning in reality again. Okay, so that is it for this video. Thank you for watching.